So, I mean, it makes perfect intuitive sense that you want to create a safe and loving environment for a child so that you are, there's this cocoon of safety so that they are free to explore and wrestle with, the challenges that they run into as they explore the world and try new things and stuff. But there's also this concept out there of safetyism, of like helicopter parenting. So, that would be where you're keeping them too safe, probably to the extent that you're preventing them from actually exploring the environment and dealing with stresses. So how do you think about that? The line between, the good or the effective amount of safety that enables a child to explore and to make mistakes and do all of these things versus what we might call safetyism, where, the parent is right there over their shoulder, keeping them safe to each and every little danger such that the child never even has a chance to make mistakes.
Right. That obviously is not a good approach, because it not only doesn't give the child the opportunity to explore, make mistakes, learn that it's okay to make mistakes and learn lessons from it, but the parent is also unconsciously giving the child another message. And that's a message: I don't trust you. That's the message: I have to be this careful, because if I don't, you're going to do something wrong, make a mistake, not handle something properly. So in that approach, an unconscious message you're giving the child is you don't trust them to do things on their own, and that is stifling to the child. So yes, there is this balance between, what I like to say is, you want to put like guardrails up. So there's, within those guardrails, they have a lot of freedom to explore, experiment, and make mistakes, but they know that the parent has their back, that the parent is setting up some guidelines from which they can't go outside of. And this is the balance between protection and freedom. I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I forgot to unmute. So there's this balance between protection and freedom. How does I think what's probably a difficult thing to figure out for many parents or potential parents is, how do they learn, where that balance between protection and freedom is? How do they know if their guardrails are too close together, too far apart? How do they learn to have a sense for this? That's probably trickier than it might sound.
Well, here's the key. The best advice I can give a parent for knowing and approaching their child in the best possible way is for the parent to go through their own therapy process. Is for the parent to do their own healing work, so that they're coming from a greater place of clarity with their child, so they're not approaching their child based on lessons that they learned in their childhood. So a lot of people will either do things the way their parents did it, which is not ideal, or they'll go in the opposite direction because they're reacting to how their parents did it. And what you want is, you want to work through your own wounds so that you have a clearer understanding of how to be with your child.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember what movie it is, but there's a movie scene I remember, and the setup is basically there's a young child. It's like a toddler, maybe a 2 or 3 year old, still sort of in a crib, still crying when it's upset, and the child is being watched by both sets of grandparents. They're both in the house at the same time, and so the child starts crying, and one of the grandfathers says, "Oh, we need to go pick up the child." Nurture the child, tell him it's okay right now, immediately. And the other grandfather says, no, we can't do that. We got to let him cry it out. And obviously, right, there's a time and place for both, but people have different thresholds for, when they go to the child and console it, to the extent that they, leave the child to sort of cry it out, so to speak, and figure out its own solution to the problem rather than relying on the nurturer. For a situation like that, how do you think about what parents should do, and how they should find that balance between going and solving the child's problems for them right away versus enabling or allowing the child to try and maybe solve their own problems for some amount
Yeah.
of time?
Yeah. Well, there are a few considerations here. I've raised children, my children, and my experience is you get to learn which crying, which emotional tension is something where there's some real problem that needs my support versus some where I feel like they can work it through themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I tuned in to my child to get a sense of what kind of pain or discomfort they're dealing with, or whether it may just be a frustration that if I interrupt too quickly, I'm not giving them the opportunity to learn to tolerate frustration.
So it sounds like you're like, if you're talking about a pre-verbal child who can't actually verbalize very much at all, you literally learned how to distinguish the different cries and screams and vocalizations that they made in order to distinguish whether or not they had an internal pain that needed to be addressed, that they needed help with, versus they dropped a toy that was out of reach versus something else that they could work out on their own. Like, you literally heard a difference.
Right, right. Now, another important aspect of this is a lot of times parents rush in because of the good intentions that the child doesn't experience any pain.
Mm-hmm.
And pain is part of life. Stress is part of life. Frustration is part of life. If you're going to rush in and take care of them every time they start to experience something difficult, you're not giving them the opportunity to learn to tolerate difficult circumstances. Sometimes parents do that because parents themselves feel discomfort with the child's discomfort. And so the parent is actually trying to take care of their own discomfort by reaching in and doing something prematurely. So again, there needs to be the awareness on the part of the parent. What's going on here? Am I responding to a legitimate issue here, or something that really requires me to sit with my own discomfort?
Mm-hmm. And so you said that for yourself, when you raised your kids, you were tuned in. You learned how to distinguish some of the different cries. And so that told you, because you took the time to distinguish them, you could perceive a difference. And that told you, when it was appropriate to step in right away, wait a little while, or wait a little while longer. I would imagine there's, some number of parents out there, potentially quite a bit, who never even sort of who never develop that kind of awareness themselves. And so they're reacting much more quickly and with a more like one size fits all strategy. Is that common? And how do you think about, as the adult, as the parent, developing that kind of awareness?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think most people probably are not aware of these distinctions that I'm raising, and they just see crying under one umbrella. But yes, it definitely can be taught. If parents want to learn, they can. They're all capable of learning that.
And you mentioned that.
Let me just make another comment here. One of the things that I notice, which is so interesting, when I work with parents, I find that as a child goes through different stages, as their child goes through different stages, as their child has different kinds of experiences, it actually brings up emotions and memories in the parent from when they were that age, going through that particular issue.
Hmm.
And so when a parent is in therapy with me, they have the opportunity that is gets triggered by what the child is going through, and it brings stuff up in the parent that's actually helpful for the parent to be addressing.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. So, you know, as the child is developing and going through the various milestones, the parent often has images from the same period of their lives in mind. And as you said before, they probably, you know, to the extent those are good memories, they probably try to mimic what was happening between them and their parents. And to the extent they're bad memories, they probably react in some way or overcompensate and go in the other direction.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.